Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And with this one, I'm going to be bringing you the talent update for patch 10.0, the next expansion, the Dragonflight. There is a massive overhaul that is going to be undertaken by the design team to completely bring back the old talent tree systems as they existed in vanilla TBC and Wrath of the Lich King. And I'm very interested to see how these talents play out. They break down specifically what their ideas are in this post that I'm going to be covering. And there's a lot of interesting things to take into account. And I'm hoping that they're going to leave some places for us to give feedback as they release more information on these talents. But Ian Hazakostas, in one of his recent interviews, was cited as saying, I think seeing a new generation play with those talents and work through those talent trees really underscored some of the things that, frankly, we lost when we shifted to the Mists of Pandaria style talents and beyond. A big piece of that was some of the granularity, the feeling of getting a level and spending a point to customize your character to make yourself a bit better in some specific way, but also that sense of hybridity that you could have. That's something that we largely lost, and so the new talent system avoids pitting player power through throughput choices against those utility hybrid choices, because we know there is always a quote-unquote right answer outcome here. And we also understand that there is a lot of strength and flexibility in the modern talent system to let players customize their talents for a particular encounter or for dungeons versus PvP, and we don't want to lose any of that. So going back and removing our Mists of Pandaria talents means that there's going to be a lot of things to take into account, and they break that down further here with their new talent trees in World of Warcraft Dragonflight. The preliminary images of the new talent system certainly display a much greater level of complexity than we've seen before in World of Warcraft. Talents will now affect you every level, not just every several levels as they do now. Choices within the talent tree will open up other possibilities, much more like a complex version of the conduit system introduced in Shadowlands. New spells and abilities will open up with each level. Players will have two trees available: your class tree, which is focused on class utility, your spec tree, which is focused on performing your role, and the talent types are represented by three different shapes: squares being active abilities, circles being passive abilities, and hexagons equals choose an ability. So there's going to be a lot to really take into account when we look at the way that these different talent trees break down. And I'm curious to see how many abilities are just spells that already existed before going into these talents that we had baseline. How many of them are going to be available for other specializations to get? Druid is a really interesting one to break down because of all of the hybridity that it has. It has 4 different specializations. So our Resto Druid's going to be able to get access to Typhoon without losing out on too much healing now moving forward. That is what I am kind of most curious to see. We can see that they're going to be bringing back other abilities as well, it looks like, with Convoke the Spirits here in the talents available. And that's where I'm wondering if there's going to be any places for feedback, because they iterate on previous Azerite traits, maybe previous artifact weapon traits as well. There's a lot of those traits that I really enjoyed from Legion, such as when you shot a Star Surge, it had a chance to shoot the Spirit of Goldrin out at the target, which was like a Spirit Wolf version of a Star Surge. I really enjoyed that just thematically, and it did a lot of damage and was fun to press. So I'm curious to see where they're going to be taking these abilities. Are they going to be kind of maybe putting up some polls or feedback with regards to old spells? I see things like Cenarian Ward being available. Is there going to be possibilities for Balance Tree to gain access to Cenarian Ward again, as it had in Mists of Pandaria, where it had so much extra hybrid healing in that expansion? And this is kind of the biggest deal moving forward with the next expansion and how they go about doing it, because it could determine so much, right? If they just put a bunch of spells that already existed, that's going to be really boring. So I am hoping that there's going to be a lot of nuance in this, and some interesting and creativities ways to go through it when you're building your character. My hope is to get my hands on this literally as soon as possible, so we can see the specific talents and the specific abilities that they're going to be locking into classes, because that determines really kind of the engine for how you're going to experience the game. It's probably the most important and foundational part of the game and its experience overall. So this is what I want to jump on right away. If you want to stay up to date with news, updates, patch changes, stuff like this, so that you're ahead of the competition, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, because I do bring all that information in real time here. And there's going to be a bunch of deep dives for every specialization as soon as that information is available, because as I said, this is some of the most important stuff that we could look at moving forward for this expansion, because this is going to determine the base of our house basically, because everything else is looking pretty fantastic in terms of new features and things and flexibility for alts and stuff like that. So this is the stuff that I want to see kind of get nailed down so that we've got a strong foundation. Moving forward, you can see that it's broken down even further with loadouts. So you're going to have the ability to preset a bunch of different options. So you might want a different specific build depending on what composition that you're fighting against in PvP, or a specific raid encounter, and then switch it to the next raid encounter. And I'm very thankful that this seems to be much more freely interchangeable. We'll have to wait and see if they introduce an item that's going to be required, similar to what's already existent for talent changes. I'm really hoping not, so that you can just kind of change this as you're out of combat as you need to. Maybe you want better DPS on trash without having to get out of the dungeon or out of the raid, and then switch it back for a boss encounter or something along those lines, because I personally really do like customizing my characters to be the best performance in any encounter. We can see on the Balance Druid returning things like potentially Nature's Vigil from previous expansions, which is kind of that active that turned all your damage into healing. So again, I've got my eyes on these abilities. This is where I saw the Goldrin right here, the Spirit of Goldrin from your Star Surge. I wonder if that's going to come back. I'd be really stoked. We can see Cenarian Ward as an icon here on the Balanced Druid tree. So is that hybridity going to be coming back for its ability to heal? We see some of the Shadowlands Conduit icons as well. These could all just be placeholders for this template for the purposes of displaying this. I feel like this is something that's going to take a lot of time and detail and effort to really nail down perfectly, and it's super important that it does. Your PvP talents are still going to exist as they are, and we aren't expected to see any new ones until the 10.1 patch in an interview that Halinka had. So with these initial abilities, some class tree abilities will already be active when you start your character, but you will also be given one class tree talent point to spend, so you can start customizing right away. The design plan is that picking a specialization becomes a much more important part of your class, and that this makes picking talents and experimenting with them a much more rewarding experience. Talent presets and loadouts, this is what I talked about, having the lower left-hand corner to be able to switch between these, the same way you'd be able to interchange your gear. Really awesome. Love that they had that, because it was my biggest concern for this, is that going back to the vanilla talent trees, I don't like paying a truck ton of gold to be able to change them to jump into to play some arenas with my friends. And I just did the raid, and now my talents are all scuffed for that situation. So this is a really heads up thing to make sure to bring into the game, while iterating simultaneously on the strengths of the pasts, also modernizing it to be more enjoyable currently in the present, which is great. That's what you love to see, is kind of taking lessons from the old and then modernizing them as well, at least for me. In this situation, I think that they've really nailed it, and it's just going to come down to specific tunings, what spells, what passives are going to be coming back into the game. And it would be really awesome if, much to the same as they did with the Mythic Plus dungeons, where they're like, hey, what old Mythic Plus dungeons would you like? And they let us vote on some of them. That would be super cool to have that for what spells or passives from previous expansions, because you can really look back into the history of the game now and take an example of every amazing talent or amazing ability for a spec and iterate on them all at the same time to create the ultimate version of every specialization. That would be kind of where I would love to see this go. We'll have to wait and see. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed this talent update, and I will catch you in the next video.